Welcome to Man in America, a voice of reason in a world gone mad. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. On this show, I get the opportunity to interview a lot of amazing people. But what I really enjoy is when someone interviews me, because oftentimes I don't get the chance to, kind of go deep into my own story and what I'm working through and what I'm learning. And so lately I was a guest on Scott Kesterson's podcast, Bards FM, and we went into a deep 2-hour long interview, which I think you'll really enjoy. So today's show is actually going to be that interview with me on Scott's show. Now, for those of you that are familiar with Scott, he does an audio-only show, so there's no video aspect for this. I'll just put a picture up for you to look at if you want to stare at something. But it's going to be an audio-only interview, but I think you're really going to enjoy it and see a lot more behind the scenes of really what's going on in my life and things I'm focusing on and what I think about the future of this country and this world. So please enjoy the show with me as a guest on Scott Kesterson's podcast, Bards FM. All right, I've got a quick question for you, and be honest. Have you ever dealt with bloating, low energy, or just feeling off in your gut? Well, you're not alone. Your gut health is basically the master switch for so much: digestion, immunity, even your mood. And here's the wild part. Most of us have way more bad bacteria than good bacteria, thanks to processed foods, stress, and even tap water. When that balance is off, it'll mess with your digestion, drain your energy, flare up your skin, and even make it harder to focus. It's like trying to run a city where 85% of the workers are on strike. That's where Vive Biotics from Perfect Origins comes in. It's not your average probiotic. It's got 15 different probiotic strains plus prebiotics, and they've put them through a special fermentation process so they actually survive the stomach acid and make it into your intestines, where they can do the real work. We're talking better digestion, less bloating, more energy, stronger immunity, and even healthier skin and mood. All in a vegan, dairy-free, gluten-free, non-GMO liquid. There's no giant capsules. So if you want to try it, click the link in the show description. They've got a 180-day money-back guarantee, so you've got nothing to lose, except maybe the bad bloating. Again, click the link in the description below.
Well, Patriots, I am really honored today, always honored, in fact, to have Seth Holhouse with us of Man in America. If you don't follow him, we'll get all that contact for you too, but do follow him. He's got an amazing show. He's been a long-time voice in this whole episodic time in which we live and trying to wake up truth. And he's a husband, he's a father, he's a homesteader, and he's just a great pursuit of truth. So Seth, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great, Scott. And it's such an honor to be on here because I started the podcast, my wife and I did back in 2020 after the election. And for most of the year of 2020, you were the most consistent podcast at that time. And you still are, like, you're still very relevant. And my wife, or either of us are often listening to you. My mom's a big fan of yours. But I can say this with all honesty, that you were one of the big influences for me wanting to start a podcast. Because I took so much away from what you were doing and with county by county and everything that you were working on. And it just felt like, gosh, if Scott can do this, like, I can do it. And I thought, oh, I'm going to do it. So yeah, you were one of the probably only 2 or 3 kind of main influences I had at that point that really, I think, gave me the encouragement and the confidence to go out and start something on my own. And here we are. So it's great to come back around full circle, 5 years later and have this conversation.
Oh, it is. I mean, it's, you and I talked about this on your show last week that, we've seen a lot of people come and go in this place, and a lot of voices have gone really high and then they almost vanish. And this is one thing that I say about your show as well, is it's very consistent. You've had a very steady flow, solid. You had a really explosive time early on when I think it was your video on election fraud got exploded out there. I mean, that was a big one. And that was when we were all so much on Twitter, but the message that I respect so much about what you're giving is just constantly just pushing for that truth and informing to make smart decisions in the world. And I think that's hopefully what we're all trying to do,
I think so. It's funny because we recently added a tagline to the show, and it's a voice of reason in a world gone mad. And that's what it's really, it's recognizing that, yes, the world has gone mad. I do think that we're living in the end of an empire, and not just an empire of the United States, but I think we're living in the time where we will see great changes coming to our civilization, our human civilization. And if you look at the just the structures of evil that have been built up around us for not just for generations, but for millennia. And I do believe that these structures are in the process of being exposed and being dismantled. That I think that a lot of things will change, but I think that contributes to a lot of the madness. But when I say it's a voice of reason, that just I don't have all the answers. I think similar to you, I just try to walk through and take people through my own process of understanding and explain why I believe something, explain why I've changed my position on something, where I might have been some way a year ago, and maybe I've learned something new. Like actually, I just had an interview this morning. I haven't published it yet, but with Matthew Arrett, who's a brilliant researcher, and he, in a lot of ways, helped me reframe a lot of the perspective of what's going on right now with the discussion of do the Jews control the world and this and all these different ideas, and that his conversation is like, wow, it really opened me up to something that I thought was really interesting. And so I really enjoy doing my best to be intellectually honest and just being myself. And that's what I commonly hear. I know you're like that too, because I've met you plenty of times offline, and it's like, oh, you're the same guy on the radio, right? Where I think some people, you meet them and you realize, oh, you're just an actor. Like you know how to put a show on, but you meet them elsewhere and they're very different. And that's why I like that. Like I get to meet people and they say, oh, wow, you're just like the Seth I hear on the show. It's like, yeah, that's all I am. Whether it's to you or my wife or my kids, I'm just this corny dad that has a podcast.
I'm with you. I think that's just it. I mean, it's, I think we can get lost in our position of this place of like, I'm a podcaster or I'm an influencer. I can't resonate with those, but people do. And when they do that, I think that we lose perspective on what we're really trying to do here. We're having conversations. That's one of the reasons that even in my interviews, when we do them with guests or however this is, like these are just conversations. And I make a point of titling it that because it's not, people have different levels of expertise and people have different ways of telling a story, but ultimately stories are what shape us. And we need to have that context to really appreciate the world and its complexities. It's not just binary. And we do this so much. We get into this binary and it's a bipolarism. This is good, this is bad. You're bad, you're good. You're part of this party, that party. I mean, it's just so unreasoned. And with that, we lose the humanity. And when we add that fuel to it, that we're just talking online too many times and we're not sitting down, literally breaking bread, having a conversation from one another, our humanity slips away. And I think that's the biggest piece, is how to maintain that conversation. In fact, just to finish that thought, I mean, my mom was talking about this just yesterday. I went down and saw her and she's just like, this world to her, as she's looking at it, she would love your tagline, by the way. And she's looking at it, she's just shaking her head. She's, I don't even know how you operate in it, because in my time, there were roles, there were things that we did. There was honesty and integrity in the basic way we lived. And we worked very hard at just sitting with one another and having conversations. And very different world now, it really is.
Oh, it's a completely different world. And I've thought about even doing a segment of the show called Remembering America, where maybe I go into nursing homes or, find different people that are much older, 80 plus, and just sit down and ask them, what was America like when you grew up? How much was your first house? Did your wife work? Was she upset she couldn't work, or was she happy to stay at home with the kids? What was the family? What was the community like? Just to ask these things, because I think that, as I mentioned before, that just in understanding the layers of deception of how controlled things have been, around us, and how, we're really at the kind of last stage of this empire, and that we're at this place where everywhere you look, at least once you start looking for it, it's like They Live, right? The old John Carpenter movie, right?
Right.
You have your glasses and you put your glasses on, you realize every single thing that is constructed around us is part of an agenda.
Right.
And I think that so much of that agenda has been, well, I think fundamentally it's a satanic agenda to destroy God's creation, destroy man, right? To get man to turn against God. I think that's the very base of it. But I think that the mechanisms of that agenda, which have been carried out for millennia, in a large part have been to destroy what I believe is the God-given culture of how humans are supposed to act and how humans are supposed to treat each other and have civility, even how we're supposed to dress. I mean, look at how people dressed in the 1800s,
Hmm.
right? Like, my wife and I, we love watching historical dramas and seeing, well, War and Peace. Look how beautiful. Like, even the lower class, they still presented themselves well. And now you walk around and you see, teenagers wearing pajama pants and girls wearing shirts with their breasts hanging out and things way too small and it's just, I think that's another aspect of it, is that there's been a systematic destruction of the real human culture and the real traditions that we're supposed to have, and even how we've been uprooted. If you look at, say, go back a couple hundred years, you might have grown up in a small village. You don't leave the village. You don't say, "Oh, hey, I'm 18 now. I'm leaving. I'm going to a different country now to live, or I'm moving across." No, you stay there with your family. You walk across the same bridge that your great great grandfather built, 150 years ago. And I think all of those aspects of tradition and that culture is it's what grounded us. It gave us these
Mm.
principles. I think that now we're living in a world that truly has gone mad, where there is no, the only culture is what Hollywood and the music industry are shoving at us. And that culture is just it's the inverse, I think, of what human culture is. And so that's what, and we'll get into this too, but I think that a lot of it goes into like the idea of like what's behind the homesteading movement, what's behind a lot of these lifestyle decisions. And it's actually, maybe at some point you could have said it was about a survival mechanism, but now it's actually, for me, in our family, it's much deeper than that. It's about returning back to human tradition and trying to live as God wanted us to live. And I think that's actually the greatest defense that we have, to against this onslaught of this very satanic globalist agenda that is trying to destroy us.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's a good segue, because the principle, you and I both have a big belief in homesteading and the many differences, I mean, the many challenges it brings. And as you've probably heard me talk about, it's more of a mindset than it is a physical location. So as I like to talk about regularly, it's like if you live in an apartment or a condo, which is frequent, you can still make efforts to start growing some of your food, even if it's sprouts, but it changes a mindset. It changes your heart position. If you're in a community and you want to grow, then become part of community gardens or work to build one or get one set aside and start working that change. Because once we start to touch what we grow, it transforms everything. Just anecdotal on this. 5 years ago, my parents didn't have a garden. And when I moved in, ended up buying their house, and they're still there. But I spent the first 2 years just aggressively building out a very involved garden. I've talked a lot about that. It's small space gardening, high intensity agriculture. That handoff has been made, and it's now there. My dad and I talk about it almost every phone call, but he's actively just in. He's become the gardener, right? I was just over there yesterday, and it's absolutely beautiful what he's done and the detailing he's done and how he's taken it to another level. But to see also the excitement of, as the fruits of the harvest are coming now, the tomatoes are coming in, some of the early onions are in, some of the early squashes coming about, and to see all that, and to see the transformation and how it changes everything. You no longer look to the store as your relationship of food. It's what you're growing, and those subtle things change us so deeply in the root of who we are as humans.
Oh, they really do. And actually, I have an interesting story. So, there's a couple, very good friends of my wife and I, and it's a Canadian woman, just lovely woman, and she's really into Ayurvedic cooking and medicine, and she's a fantastic cook. And her husband is Indian. He's also one of my long-term friends, and he is a extremely advanced like developer. He's someone that would be very high up, like I say, a Microsoft type company developing AI or something. I think he actually is working a lot on that, but he's extremely intelligent. But what's funny is that the two of them recently in the past year bought an organic farm. And so he's someone that was working in like the super tech world. And I was at their farm, yeah, because they're like 4 minutes from us, which is amazing. And I was there this past weekend. I was talking to him, and his name's Kanan. He's a wonderful man. And I was talking to him, and I was like, "What's this been like for you?" He goes, "Oh, he's like, it's crazy because he's like, I'm looking around thinking, okay, what can I automate? What can I use AI for?" He goes, but then he goes, this morning, he goes, my job was I was trimming basil. He's like, and I sat there for probably an hour just trimming the basil with scissors and cutting the basil up and packaging it to sell. And he said that he first thought, okay, at the very beginning, okay, how can I automate this? What's a better solution? What's a better system for this? But then he realized that the process of holding the vegetable and trimming it by hand was something that you couldn't achieve through technology. He's going through this very profound spiritual transformation,
Wow.
going from, again, someone that did everything through automation and computers and tech and was always living in that world, to he still has a tech job for a big company, but he works remotely. But now he's going through this process of learning how to farm the land and get his hands dirty and learning how to grow food. And it's amazing seeing that process, because if someone can go from being on the forefront of a career in technology and database understanding and large language models and AI and everything, and he goes from that to then also running an organic wellness farm. It's this beautiful transformation, and I'm seeing it through a lot of people. A lot of people that I know. Actually, yesterday it was funny because we have some friends, and their daughter was over with us, and then one of the other people came over, and before we knew it, we had like 5 or 6 people that were here, and I was getting ready to cook dinner. I said, "Hey, let's just do a cookout, like invite a few more people." And before we know it, we had probably 5 adults and 8 children all over, and I cooked this huge cookout with sweet corn and sausage and everything. And we're talking to them, and now they're all going to be homeschooling, and so they decided they're all going to be homeschooling as part of going back and getting back into their culture. And so I'm seeing that there's just this interesting shift that's happening of people wanting to go back to the traditional way of doing things. But as you and I were talking about on the show, that on my show had recently, it's not being done out of a fear mindset. It's not being done out of this thinking of, I need to prep, I need to get 5 years of food, I need to get 50,000 rounds of ammo to defend the 5 years of food. It's obviously, I think those are important aspects of survival and everything, but there's a much deeper shift, I think, that's happening, and it's amazing to witness it both within our own home, but also within the community that we're seeing around us.
Those are good. Those are good. Let's talk a little bit about this conflict of culture that we're facing right now, because we are truly in that. I mean, I would frame it spiritually, wide gate, narrow gate path, where everybody's being told this narrative that you can't stop this future of AI and the fourth industrial revolution, which creates a false positive. When I say that, it's a start to look at all the things that are done in terms of, quote, winning, in terms of promoting that world, because you've accepted the premise that you can't stop it. And yet, as you step into homesteading and trying to get back to the land and starting to provide for yourself, you realize that there's a completely alternate path. And that alternate path is taking you into a place of, for me, it's spiritual freedom, spiritual peace. And what's your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think it's deeply connected to the spirit. Absolutely. Also, I think that if you look at say the fourth industrial revolution, right? You look at what's happening with AI, with technology, with smart cities. I think what you're seeing is this divergence, where you're seeing that there's 2 paths. You're seeing the people that are just embracing the technology. They're lining up to get their eyes, retinas scanned so they can get the new digital currency from Sam Altman, or they've got their Alexas in every room, and they're so impressed with it, right? We were looking at cars the other day, and we were car shopping because and we sat in one of the cars, and the guy's like, "Oh, check this out." He goes, "Hey Google, do this," and the car respond is like, "Okay, okay," and I'm like, "Okay, we're not getting this car," right? Like, how do you deactivate that?
Right.
So you can see that there's people that are really embracing it, and of course it has its conveniences, but look at what Google as a search engine has done to us. It gives you the convenience of having this information brought to you, but now through the censorship and everything, and not to mention the data mining and all that kind of stuff, what has it taken from us? And so I think that, to me, everything I see in the world around it boils down primarily into the spiritual battle of, is this good or is it evil? And you can see, and what I'm seeing is that the evil has really attached itself to this technological development, and through this trying to and fundamentally detach people from God's earth. And I think the inverse of that is, say spending all day staring at a computer screen, versus going out and spending your day gardening, or tending to the chickens, or whatever it is. And that's something that a change that we've made in our family, is that now every day we try to start with some sort of outside activity. So instead of just starting the day making coffee and sitting down and talking and everything, it's like, no, let's go outside. So we take our girls out, let's go monitor the mama chick, and her baby chicks, right? We've got, I think 11 little baby chicks running around in one of the pens we built. Or we'll go do some gardening, or we'll go look at the frogs in the little frog pond that I built. And you can see the difference, so that when you go out there, so much of the stress, and you mentioned like the biofield, and how these programs, like I imagine even Elon Musk's, this phone, actually, I think even AirPods can read the biofield. I saw some patents for that, right? You look at how all of that is able to, like, they can say they can take that phone, and they can probably monitor your interaction on X and measure how your energetic field is reacting to what you're being fed on X, which is a whole new level of data set that they're gathering on people. And you take that can quickly kind of pull you into a place of negativity, of fear, of hopelessness, or even of anger or desire, or any of those things, right? It's so easy to get sucked into that. You leave the phone inside and you go out, and hopefully you can see this, see the blue sky that day. They're dumping chemtrails on us, but you go out and you see the sun, you hear the birds. Even last night, my wife and I, we went and sat, we made some green tea and spent our entire evening sitting on the front porch, just listening to the bugs and listening to the little waterfall, the frog pond, and just talking. And it was spiritual. You could say it's grounding in a way that it brings you back into the focus. I think that's what a lot of the movement is about. It's about getting back to nature, getting back to, I think, what God designed and not what man has designed.
I couldn't agree more. One of the things I've built as a pattern with my dog is we go walking late. I mean, I take her out a number of times, but we walk down the driveway usually at 11:30 or 12:30 at night, and she loves it. But I've also kind of walked with her pattern because she likes to sit and watch, and so I'll flash my headlamp off. It's a pretty long drive, and I'll pop my headlamp off, and we just sit there under the stars, just in the world, and it reminds you of just that place of seeking calm, and really what so many people don't have, because the world is pretty frenetic, and it has in many ways gone mad in ways, and I think that so much of that is, I make that comparison to someone who is a great singer that can hold a frequency and gets the crystal glass to vibrate, and it's not that the glass suddenly breaks. It's the frequency, the sustained frequency creates micro cracks within the glass until finally there is a total systemic failure. And so it's not just one explosion, as they like to show. It's a frequency. Whether you sing or whether it's a generated frequency, that frequency is moving steady, and those micro cracks continue to go and grow and grow until it completely fails. And I would say that the risk of that right now is pretty true and pretty real with what we're seeing in society, because there's a level of frequency that's causing this increasing destabilization of who we truly are. And so the real question is, down the way, which it's not, we could do a whole show on this, but where does that leave us when people just finally break? And that's either a good or it's a bad. It depends on what the main influences are, which I think gets back to your point of why the root of the homesteading movement is so important. Because it establishes solid anchor points, like islands, if you will, around, and they're out there, they're scattered, but it's the wisdom that comes from God and comes from our relationship with the land that is held and is outside of this craziness. And your thoughts?
Oh, I agree completely. I mean, I think that it's interesting because I like your analogy of the glass, because I think that if you get into the Schumann resonance and you get into some of those things, you can get into HAARP and 5G. They have the ability to do those things, right? They have the ability on a cellular level, not to mention with all the technology that's inside of our bodies, even for people that never touched the mRNA technology or anything, you're still breathing in nanotech that's being dumped on us out, from the skies, right? So it's, obviously detoxing is very important, but that stuff is all remotely controlled. I mean, they can, and it sounds kind of wild, but it's not for you, and I think not for your audience, that people that understand these technologies do exist. But I think that that's exactly what's happening, because I think that they want it to break, and I think that that's what they want, right? Because the order from chaos, they want to create so much chaos that they're then forced to come in as the saviors, as the people that will then bring in chaos and say, look, it doesn't, as you can see, it doesn't make sense to have these sovereign nations. The idea of having a nation is so outdated. We need to have one, global centralized rule, one centralized religion to unite everybody, which I think even the religious wars, I think it's all fomented, right? I think that it's absolutely part of the plan to get the Christians, the Jews, and the Muslims primarily to be so at each other's throats that they can come in and say, look, as you can see, these religions have reached their end, and now they're just full of violence and hatred. So we're going to bring in our own religion, the one world religion. So you can see these patterns of trying to create enough stresses and fractures that the glass breaks, which I do think is the plan, right? And that's the thing, is again tying into the idea of homesteading and preparedness. If you look around at this world, as we were talking about earlier, and you see how much of it has just been constructed around us, whether it's the science that we're being taught, the media. I mean, almost everything that we're seeing is false, unless you go out to nature. You go out, barefoot, walk through the woods and feel the trees and smell the air. Like, that's real. But so much of what has been created around us has been fake. And that's, I think, especially post-COVID, people are now realizing that it's like, oh yeah, the government, they're all liars. They're all fakes and cheats. The media, it's all fake. The music industry is all fake. It's all just part of a social engineering and MK Ultra programming and all kinds of stuff, subliminal messages. And the education system, like we're seeing, the medical system, that all this stuff is actually, it's not just fake, but it's evil and rotten to the core. And it's being presented as this beautiful solution to everything. But I do think, though, that I'm not like a doomsdayist kind of person where I think, oh, we're all going to die in fire and brimstone. But I do think, though, that if we believe that in our lifetime that this evil will be purged, or there'll be some sort of, I think, kind of flood type event where the world is cleansed of this, we have to rebuild. Like, we have to get through whatever that phase looks like. And I think the key is getting through it while maintaining our morality and our virtue. Like, that's one of the things I'm really kind of honing in on more now. There's a lot of preppers where it's almost like throw your morality out the window when survival's at stake and shoot your neighbor and whatever it takes, right? Put landmines in your front yard. And, but I do think, though, that that we are entering into some sort of significant shift that's coming. And I think that homesteading and, getting back this way of life, I think, is actually, it's the way, it's the path to get through it. And anyway, I'll let you respond to that. But that's where I'm at.
It's good. I mean, and you just kind of, it used to be survivalists, and then it became preppers, and now the maturing of that is the homesteader, because what you're trying to do. It's like you said, I had this conversation. We had a conversation, but I've also had a conversation with others. The same thing. It's like there's no more desire to, like in the original prepping or survivalist, you're going to build your sniper hide, and you're going to have your perimeter, and you're going to have your long range rifle ready, and you're going to set up your lights, and you can't survive as an island. It's just not going to work. And the realization that all of that is just kind of a framing around the old world, the old way, the dying empire, the dying age is all about fear, rather than embracing this unity where we can really get along well. I mean,
You've probably heard me talk about the importance of being prepared, and that includes having access to life-saving medicine when you need it. That's why I want to tell you about ReliableMedicines.com. They offer affordable, prescription-based meds like ivermectin, fenbendazole, hydroxychloroquine, essential antibiotics, and more, all shipped directly to your door quickly and discreetly. There's no runaround, no waiting in line, no begging your doctor. Shipping is fast, usually 7 to 15 days, and their support team is available 24/7 if you need anything. I've used them myself, and I can tell you, This is the kind of resource every family should have on hand. And just for my listeners and viewers, you can use the promo code MIA15 at checkout to get 15% off your order. So head over to reliablemedicines.com or just click the link in the description and stock up on life-saving medications while you still can. Again, that's reliablemedicines.com using the promo code MIA15.
This community I'm in here is everybody's kind of on their own, but great neighbors. Like, you want to count on somebody. Just a great example the other night. It's got to be like 11 o'clock at night. My neighbor calls me. That you down on your property? I'm like, no. And he's like, something's going on down there. And he just looked out his window and somebody was down at the end of the property parked with their lights on. And just letting me know, we don't hang out. We don't do barbecues, but it's a looking out for each other. And that's that sort of respect. If I need help, he's there. But I'm just saying that's kind of everybody doing their own thing, which I think is just a real exemplar place of a community. You jumped into homesteading like all of us. You're actually on your second project, so to speak. But I want you to kind of walk through that, because in a small way, I did community gardens for a long time years ago. Then didn't do anything, and then when I moved back to Oregon, I took on the project of building a sustainable small garden and homestead in the back of in the backyard of the house down there. And now I'm on to a new project, which is cattle and chickens and other things. So talk a little bit about your first project, of the challenges and some of the lessons learned, because I think a lot of the times when we talk about homesteading, it seems like it's an easy thing, and it's really, for me anyway, I don't want to speak for you, but I think for me there's a lot of trial and error in it, that you have to fail to understand how to succeed.
Yeah. So in 2019, early 2020, my wife and I were living in New York City. I think we were on the 30th floor. We were in a high-rise apartment in New York City, which I would say is arguably probably one of the worst places you could ever possibly want to live if there's any kind of natural disaster, right?
Yeah,
I remember back during when Sandy hit, I lived on the 14th floor of an apartment. The power was out. So I had to walk up and down 14 flights of stairs in a pitch black, kind of service, everyone uses the elevator, of course, right? So, the service stairs are never used, but that was how you got up and down. And it was this realization of like, oh my gosh, we are so fragile now. But that was, again, that was, Hurricane Sandy, that was quite a while ago. But, we were living in a high-rise building, and it was actually early 2020, late 2019. It was kind of like more of like a luxury kind of high-rise that had like a swimming pool and some of those things like that. And there were a lot of young Chinese that were there, which is very common, right? So, their parents are sending them, to go to school in New York, et cetera. And they're putting them in these buildings that have these amenities like gyms and pools and everything. And around that time, before COVID was even announced in America, we noticed they all started wearing masks. And it's like, okay, this is strange. Like when you're in an elevator with 6 Chinese that are all wearing masks, it's like, this is not common, right? There's something going on here. And we had been wanting to leave too for a while. And that was when we found that my wife was pregnant with our first child. And so that was the time. So we actually left New York City and moved back to Ohio, right? So I grew up in Ohio, and it was kind of like, okay, let's go back to the countryside. We rented a few places when we first got back there. Then our first this is right during COVID and everything. We bought a 5-acre property that was about an hour outside of Columbus. And it was kind of rural. It was still part of a neighborhood, but it was still 5 acres. We had a big pasture. And so that was during that time, that was, say 2021, 2022. Still COVID was really a big thing. There was a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear narratives. That was when the Ukraine war started. There was a lot of the discussion about the chemical fertilizer shortage and food shortages. And so it was a very fearful time for us. And so we kind of took the approach of prepping, but we were very overzealous with it. Like because it was very fear-based, we really pushed ourselves to the extreme. Like building, we built, let's say at one point we had 50 chickens for a family of 3, mind you, like, husband and wife and a 1-year-old daughter, right? We had 50 chickens, which was way too many chickens. We built like massive gardens. We built, we had in our house we owned at the time, we had like a cement basketball court that the previous owner had built. We turned the entire basketball court into this huge raised bed garden. So I went out and bought all these big, 2x12s and 2x10s and built this huge raised bed garden. And we had so much food coming in. I took our whole front yard and turned it all into gardens. We built fruit, fruit tree guilds. And I mean, we went so over the top with it. And actually by the time harvest came around, we couldn't even keep up with it. I'd go out and come back with two 5-gallon buckets of peppers and tomatoes, and we had so much food coming back in. But it was very, very fear-based, but also what we realized is that we had no community. And that was one of the big things, is that we had no community. So even though we had all this, we had no one to even to give the food to. Like we maybe knew a couple neighbors, but it was very slow to get to know new neighbors when you're from an outside area. And so that was one of the big things for us that was so difficult. It was just that we felt so isolated, and we thought, well, like, what are we doing all this for? Like, what's the purpose? Is our plan just to build up? We had a couple of years worth of stored food. We had a freeze dryer, so I was freeze drying eggs, freeze drying beef. We were canning. We had a big, giant pressure canner. We're doing all this stuff and accumulating all these things. And of course, Ohio has great gun laws, so I'm every week there's 1,000 rounds of ammo showing up at the front door, and a new AR-10 and new shotguns. And so we're kind of accumulating all this stuff, but we felt so alone, actually, and it was because it was from a place of fear. And so anyway, in I think it was about a year and a half ago, we said, look, this isn't the right place for us anymore. And so we now live in upstate New York. And I've never told anybody publicly what state we live in, because in Ohio, people would show up at our front door. They'd figure out where we lived somehow, and they'd come knocking at the door and like, hey, is this Man America's house? I'm like, how on earth did you figure out where I lived?
Dude, I've had this.
And so so because my wife and I, we spent most of our adult lives living in New York City and in some parts of upstate New York, we had actually built this huge network of friends that, and so anyway, we said, even though it's a blue state, I know you're in Oregon, right? So you're
same thing.
You understand what it means to kind of be behind enemy lines, but the thing is that New York is a red state with big blue cities in it, like most states, right? So in our region, it's amazing. We've got this beautiful raw milk farm. It's like 5 minutes away from us. Beautiful, beautiful people there. So anyway, about a year and a half to 2 years ago, we said, like, we need to go back to that region, because that's where our community was. Even though I had some family that were back in Ohio, but they had their own lives. They're busy, and it wasn't what we had really thought it was going to be. And so we came back here, and we bought. So we had to kind of start over. And the funny thing is that the house that we put so much work into back in Ohio ended up, like, a doctor and his wife bought it, and they hated everything we had done. So they actually, so as much money and time and effort we put into building all this, they wanted us to, in the clause, give them like an allowance to actually dig up all the gardens in the front yard, to get rid of the chicken coop, to tear out the wood burning stove I put in there, because we had a gas fireplace. I ripped it out, put in like a really great Blaze King wood burning stove. They wanted to tear that out. So we dug a well on the property, spent $12,000 digging a well. They wanted to go back to city water. So it was kind of painful, because we had done all this stuff, and someone came in that just absolutely hated everything about it, but liked the house and liked the neighborhood. And thankfully, we didn't have to go back and see it, because it would have been so depressing that they would have gone in there and just took out everything that we had done, which was just, that's just how it works, right? So anyway, we ended up a little over a year ago, we bought a property up here. It's 7 acres. Maybe about 2.5 to 3 of it's cleared. The rest is forested, but in a very rural area. And so we've gone through, we took all those lessons learned back in Ohio, and we've applied them here. So we've been way more strategic in terms of constructing our gardens and building, pens for the animals. And the chicken coop, it's like we built an amazing chicken coop. We poured concrete for the base of the chicken coop, and it's bear proof. And so it's like we really did things properly. But what I have to say, though, is that the best thing about coming back here is that we've now found a community again. And even when I mentioned that, this couple that we're very good friends with, we've known for 15, 20 years. 3 minutes down the road, 4 minutes down the road, they've got a 12-acre organic garden or organic farm, wellness farm. So we go over there and they've got vegetables and plants just coming out. They got greenhouses and they do weddings and they do host events. Actually, we'll probably end up doing some meetups there, which will be lovely to do. But so we've come back to this region, and actually it was interesting because in the journey of preparedness, I feel like I went through it backwards. It's like, okay, step one, secure my water. Okay, then secure the food, make sure I can protect it with a gun, make sure I got enough ammunition, learn how to use that. So we kind of went from the very, very raw survival out. And actually the last thing, it was almost an afterthought, was the importance of community. But actually that's been the first thing for us here. And obviously we're still doing gardens, and we've still got a lot of our food stores and all those things that are very important to us that we've built up a lot of supplies to, so if we have to live, without any external inputs of food, we could survive for a couple of years if we had to, right? But what's key though is that we've started to establish a community here. And I think that's the thing that is so easy for people to overlook when they start getting into like that survivalist mentality, is they overlook how important the community is. And somewhere, we have neighbors that, we're not doing barbecues with them, but one of my neighbors has probably 2 acres of just firewood. And that's his main thing. He's a firewood guy. So he charges, I think he charged $280 for a cord of firewood delivered, which was fantastic. The other neighbor right across the street from him, which is right down the street from us, she's a retired nurse. It's like, okay, I've put that in my mind. Okay, she's a nurse. So we're starting to kind of meet these neighbors and build this community. But then we go within 5 or 10 minutes of our house, and now we know we've got the farm stand. We've got we have the milk farm where we get our raw milk. We've got, the other friends that own this farm. Like we're really starting to assemble this community. So even if I need, say I'm doing some solar work or whatever, I need a hand, I've got 10 different people I can call and say, hey, can you come over for a couple of hours and help me put these panels up? They're too heavy for me. And we have that now. And I'd say this is the most kind of amazing part about the process, is actually reconnecting in that community, not to mention the homeschool community too. That's one of the reasons we wanted to come back here, is now it's, we'll tell our friends, hey, we're doing a party for something, and we'll have 20 or 30 kids show up. And they love coming over to our house because we've got the frog pond, they've got the chickens, we've got dogs, we've got kittens. We had goats. We had goats for a couple of months, but actually ended up getting rid of the goats because it wasn't the right arrangement. I got really sick because of the goats too, which is a whole different story. But anyway, so so this is where we're at now. And so we took all those lessons learned. But I think that, again, like the biggest lesson I think is that like community has to be first, because like one of the things that you'll discover when you're reading any kind of survival, advice books or novels or whatever, no one ever survives alone. No one ever survives if they're just that one family trying to hold down their entire property. It just doesn't work. You need to have the community.
It's interesting. There was a piece that I came across. It was during COVID. It was really eye-opening. It was written by a survivor of the civil war in Serbia and in Bosnia. And that was the takeaway. It didn't matter how much ammo you had. Ammo just became a trade commodity to get food. Didn't matter how much gold you had. In fact, it didn't mean anything, because it was even worth less than ammo, because ammo was that piece. But it was the community that allowed them to survive. And we forget that key component. I'm agreeing with you 100%. A lot of your discussion was very much my pathway in the first garden and that first homestead section I built aggressively. And it was so much like you're talking about. It's like, maximize everything, double dug beds, high density planting, add as many capacities within this space as possible, from terracing the back part of the property to create big beds, build a greenhouse over it, do the, put in the extra water supplies, which is good. It's good in either way, but everything you could possibly do, grow bags in every other place I could put them, everything we could do. We put in the wood stove, which was good, which ironically, the weather has been such that I don't think my parents have used the wood stove, but just a couple of times, right? But that's all fine. But I'm just saying that I'm with you, and including buying new guns and stacking ammo and adding my ham radios and every chance you get, just like it just seemed like the deliveries between UPS and the mailmen and Amazon flow or FedEx was just a constant flow in and out of the house just to bring stuff in as I'm working. Up here, that pivot has really been different. It's a different pace, and it's a lot less urgency. My dad, the handoff to having my dad do the garden, which is awesome to see, and I enjoy watching it because he's now tailoring it to their lifestyle. It's just two of them. It's with me, it's three. We had the same problem. I had the same problem growing way too much food, and then you don't have the outlet to bring it. It's like, okay, we'll bring it down to the Y where people have stuff out there, and because the other folks in the grow stuff in the community are all self-sufficient anyway. So we have sort of that in there. So definitely a change in mentality. And then when you get back to the principles of community and that's really the core. I mean, as an example, this goes back to maybe even 3 years. Early on with taking on cattle, that's been a whole journey. But I got the guy that was helping me told me, be careful when you go down the lower field. It's pretty wet. And he was careful with his truck. Well, I have a Jeep, so who cares, right? I can 4-wheel drive my way through anything. And I go down on this lower pasture and I'm bringing in hay and I feed the hay, and then I've got the trailer behind the Jeep. Well, it is straight up gumbo down there in the fall and winter, and I buried my Jeep. And so I'm out there with my winch and running that and trying to run straps, and my phone rings. Scott, this is Paul. Like, what's going on, Paul? He's like, are you stuck out in that field? And he's way over on the hill. I go, yeah. He goes, one of my guys looked over and thought you were. He said, I'll be over in a minute. So he comes over with his vehicle. My dad came out. I don't know how I think he called me and said, how are you doing? I'm like, not good. So he comes out. So suddenly we have this instant community, right? And we got the Jeep out. Trailer sat for the whole winter until I got to the spring. I was like, I'm not going to touch it. I'll leave it. But those are the moments when you realize like you really have good neighbors, and a good community around you. And mine here, like I said, isn't defined. I think what you have is fantastic. It sounds amazing with the connection between families and children and homeschooling. Here is nobody has kids out here. So it's not that that's a negative. It's just that everybody's trying to just get their stuff done on their property, but always ready to help. And my neighbor up the road, I had a calf drop, I had twins drop, and I had one that was stillborn. And I'm out of my league on this. And I call him and he's like, call his wife, both of them. She was busy and she's like, hang on, Ed's available. And so Ed jumps on his side-by-side, just races down the hill. And so he's coaching me from the roadside as I'm on the other side in the field. And he's telling me like, do this, do that. That's just the way we survive and how we come together. And at the core of, like you're saying, it's the root of great homesteading. But more than that, it's the root of where we're stepping into, I believe, in the direction we have to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because, well, gosh, there's so many things to get into, but I feel like I do, and maybe it just is me, maybe I'm not sure, your sense, but I just have this sense that within my lifetime, probably within the next, say, 5 or 10 years, there's going to be some sort of very significant shift in humanity. You could say it's akin to a flood, right? And that's why, I'm writing a book called Prep Like Noah, which we can talk about if you want to at some point. And, but it's the idea that there's something coming, but I believe that whatever it is that's coming is 1,000% part of God's plan. And so I don't think, though, that as much as I've gotten into like the different disastrous scenarios like EMP and all these different things that really wipe out so many people and they turn neighbor against neighbor because everyone's starving, and I just have this feeling that whatever's coming, it's not going to be something that was going to turn everyone into heathens and survivalists. I think it's something that will disrupt our life as we know it, because it needs to be disrupted, because we're living in a fallen, wicked
Amen.
world. So it needs to be changed. The flood has to come and wipe out this evil. However, I really believe that part of the process, part of this change, is going to be taking humanity and returning it back to the path of tradition and back to the path of human culture. And that's why I think that even this sense of, what I'm just, obviously I've had the podcast, for some time and covering a lot of, geopolitics, which I'll continue that kind of stuff. But I'm really feeling like that the next couple of years, I'm going to be focusing a lot more on community building, a lot more on trying to teach people about preparedness, the importance of it, but not in a fearful way, right? But I also think that if you look at these scenarios, these different kind of disaster scenarios, one of two things can happen. One is that everyone turns against each other, and you've got complete chaos and raping and looting and pillaging and murder. I think the other is that what you have communities that then turn inward on themselves, and they strengthen. And I think that that's the path that we're on. Is it whatever it is that's kind of coming, whether it's a solar flare or a pole shift or whatever it is. I just have this feeling and deep inside of me that it's going to be something that's going to disrupt everything that we know. These evil systems will collapse amidst it, and it's certainly going to be difficult. Like, I think the people that are not preparing, and right now they're spending their extra time watching Monday Night Football, and maybe they're going to be caught off guard, but still, I think if they're good people, there's still hope for them, right? Because if it was only, the thing is that, say there's some sort of cataclysmic event, if the only determining factor of who survives was how well you prepared, how well you've done in building your bunker, we're all screwed. Because I can't afford a $100 million bunker like Mark Zuckerberg, right? If that was the case, only the elites would survive, and they're certainly preparing. But I do think that it's something that I think, again, by God's hand, will change so much of what this world is. But I think that it will be done in a way that difficulty will forge communities. And I think that it will forge people in a way that it brings us back together. It really will make us human again, and not human in terms of like the fallen human, but actually human in the way that God designed us. Strong communities, strong moral foundations. Because I think a lot of what's led to the moral decay in this country has been the lack of disasters. It's been the comfort. It's been the complacency, the entertainment, the bread and circuses. And I think that when all that is taken away, that we will get back to a place that maybe is more difficult, a more difficult way of life, but the average person won't be arguing over how many genders there are, or which politician is going to help save things. It's people will just be coming together and working together as communities. And that's what I feel like that my calling at this stage of this journey is, to try to lead into that even more, and have these conversations. Talk about the importance of community as we see it, because there's a lot of people that maybe they fear, they see something about a pole shift, or they see the Maui fires and these things, and they get really scared and think, okay, we got to make sure we have food. And they're not hearing this kind of message. You go to YouTube and you go, search for preparedness, and it's very fear-based, right? It's like, and it's also, okay, make sure you have these 10 items that I get a commission on, right? And this is the whole video. But I think that there's going to be a different shift, that what you and I are talking about, I have a feeling that you and I, say in 2 or 3 years, we could look back on this conversation and we could say, man, we were both sensing something. We didn't know what it was, but we were both sensing something that was coming. I think, and now at that time, maybe we'll see what it is.
One of the things I remark on to myself, I may have mentioned it to you, and I think we talked about it pre-show last week, but to your point exactly, there's very few people that I encounter that you arrive with not just the conclusion, but the process of getting there is so similar. I mean, a lot of the things you talk about are very native to what we talk about here. The process and stepping, the whole seeing of the picture of where we're going. And one of those things that I think is happening right now is that as we go through this shift, I think people need to take a step back and realize what it's doing to them. If you're really going to be focused on that community and moving forward versus feeling the torsion and the tension in a system that is torquing you, you're going to start seeing the eruptions. Here we see it already. It's happening. And it's really with those places, especially in this very frenetic environment of the web, it's so important to take a step back and get to the land and really feel the feet on the ground to get that anchoring, because there is a big shift coming. I 100% agree with you. It's coming like a freight train. I think it's obvious by all the indications. I mean, I even say many times, I even wonder sometimes if most of the elites are gone and they're just using the technologies now to simulate that they're here. which is quite possible, and then give us the illusion there's leadership, but that leadership is all intended to keep us in conflict so they can roll over the new control grid, right? But it's only controls you as much as you're willing to step into it. And that's where that line of trust in God and trust in faith and community and really building on that center of where there's just love and respect for one another is a completely different area of living. It's literally that split. And when we get there, there's so much more liberty and freedom that exists within that space. I think you've been describing that a lot. Let's talk a little bit about the principles of homeschooling, because that's obviously a big topic for you and your community. Are you looking at this in terms of like you homeschooling alone, or are you coming up with like community sharing pods or things like that?
Well, we're still early in the process just because we have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old. So even our 4-year-old, we're in no rush to start trying to introduce a curriculum, right? To me, it's like the homeschool lessons for her are, hey, let's go take care of the chickens together.
Amen.
Let's go weed the garden. Let's go pick some food. Let's go look at the frogs in the pond. Or we're walking on a path and say, hey, look, what plant is that, June? She goes, oh, that's poison ivy. Okay, yeah, you got it. There's 3 leaves. She'll say, what does that sound like? Oh, what does it sound like? Is that an owl? No, it's a dove. It's what you hear in the day, because owls you're going to hear at nighttime because they're nocturnal. What's that mean? So a lot of that's what a lot of it is right now is just the learning through going through life. My wife right now, she's out at the grocery store with our 4-year-old. And I'm sure, she's also been trying to do this more too, and kind of teaching, well, this is how this works and this is how that works. And so that's part of it. I think that in realizing that you are your child's greatest teacher, whether you want to be or not, as a parent, you're the greatest teacher they're going to have. And so, so we're still figuring out a lot of the specifics of how we're going to go about things. But one thing that we definitely want to do, and this is it's really great that we're finding this, is that we want to build a homeschooling community. And not like we're going to start one. I mean, there's communities that exist. We have a lot of friends. I mean, because between just the friends that we have in this area, we probably have 10 families that have kids that are under, say, 8 or 10 years old, and there's probably 30 or 40 kids. And so even with that small community, we plan on doing, even like every week, we're going to have a homeschool day. Maybe we rent a place or something like that where everyone goes together and there's little lessons and curriculums. Even our property, there's part of what we want to do with our property is we want our property to be the place that maybe once a week we have a homeschooling day here where we take the kids out and say it's, fall and it's a fall harvest. So we'll take the kids out and we'll show them how to harvest the vegetables. Here's how you tell, if a tomato is ripe or not. Here's how you pick a bean without ripping the whole plant off out of the ground, right? For little kids, obviously. And so we're still figuring out, but what we've come to is that we don't want to be homeschooling in isolation. Like that's something we know. Like we really want to have our children growing up around other children as much as possible because they learn so much. But we also don't want that to happen through dropping them off at a bus stop and having them leave our oversight, even going to a nice private school, right? There's some good Waldorf schools around here, but even the Waldorf schools, they're teaching a lot of the LGBTQ stuff we're finding in their curriculums. And so even we wouldn't even trust those schools. But I think that at the very foundation of it, though, is we want to be able to, regardless of what curriculum, what path, we want to be able to do it together with other families and other children. Because, and to me, that's what we're seeing. Having kids is one of the best ways of building community. Because even for families that we know, say there's a stay-at-home mom and that she's got 2 kids she's homeschooling, if she has a chance to come over to visit our house and we make her some tea and I make her a nice coffee and the kids are out playing in the yard together, it's like the best day for that mom who's looking for ways to get out of the house. And so that's what we're trying to do, is really lean into that and create much more of that community where it's not isolated. Actually, that's how we're approaching it.
I think it's good. I have 2 adopted sons, and I homeschooled them for a couple of years, but it was just me.
Really,
and that takes us back to the 90s. So, but it was grueling. I mean, it's a huge commitment. This is pre-internet the way we have today. It was, getting up early, did a lot of PBS programming, a lot of studies that and then just whatever, I was making my own curriculum as we go. So on a daily basis. And it was everything you say, we included. I was managing a community garden, so that became part of it. Kitchen activities became part of it. Daily life and became part of it. We had martial arts, all of these things I was leading. But it's very demanding. And so one of the things I talk about frequently is what you just hit on, which is if you aren't homeschooling, you can help build community or help support in different ways. Some of that may be just helping with curriculum. Some of it is connecting other people. Some of it is offering yourself to teach a day for a mom or something like this. It's all really important because in that is where really the root of the great homeschooling is when there's a measure of community, even if you are the community's a ways away, but that would be the adventure to do that. And it's something we really, for me, it's one of the critical nodes in this new step of getting the children away from the indoctrinated programming that is so endemic, because it's hitting them young. It's crushing their joy. It's crushing their innocence. It's also crushing their inspiration and creativity. And it's shaping it and boxing it in so much. And there's nothing more inspiring than to see a young child into an environment where they can explore and they can do things in so many ways.
Yeah, it's so important. What's also one other thing that I'm really realizing. So I went to art school, but I was very much so just an entrepreneur, and did a lot of work in media, worked with the Epoch Times. That was really kind of passion driven, right out of college. But that's one of the other things too, is that for one, especially because we've got two girls, I want them to just know that if their only aspiration in life is just to be the best mother possible, I will support that fully, 100%. Right? That's in my opinion, that's the best thing that they could strive for, is just to raise the next generation. But beyond that, though, what you realize is that the regular curriculum of school, it's all about just building slaves. It's all about building people that, as you look, when Rockefeller took over the education in early 1900s, it was all about building people that wouldn't threaten their power position, people that would just be good little factory workers. They'd show up at doing work. Now it's, they show up and they go sit in their cubicles and do their work. And so that's another thing too, is that I'm really looking forward to, and I've been really trying to integrate these things into some of the early lessons I've been teaching my daughter, my 4-year-old, is just the idea of entrepreneurship and showing, it's like, so she's starting to grasp the idea of money, right? Like, oh, like you can buy that. It's like, okay, if you do this chore, here's $1. And she can buy a squishy toy with that $1, right? If we go to the store. But that's one of the other things too, is that I'd love for, say by the time they're 10 years old, they might, say 10 and 7, maybe they've got a little Etsy store. And they're selling things. Like I really want to grow them into people that aren't limited with the thinking that they have to go get a job somewhere. It's like, no, you can create your own wealth, right? Like don't be burdened by that. Like, and that's also one of the important things I want to make sure that whatever direction we're going through with the homeschooling, that it's building that type of thinking. Like that's really, really important. The thinking that they can actually, like through their creativity and through their ability to sell and to negotiate, they can expand, and they're not limited in the same way that so many people are limited, thinking that, gosh, they've had the same, what's my resume look like? I've had the same job for 20 years. And gosh, I can't go create a business. Like I can't lose my 401k. It's the golden handcuffs that they trap so many people. So I really hope that a lot of the lessons that we can teach will help them see beyond that.
That's good. It's really good. You've in the past anyway, we're pretty big on gold and silver. I think you still are. This new economy obviously is just fast forwarding into the whole digital space and pushing it very quickly. When you start looking at that direction, how are you? What's your mindset in terms of homesteading and keeping true to true money and possibly alternative economies?
Well, so I'm definitely, I'm not a crypto person, like at all, for a lot of reasons. I mean, for one, I think that it might offend some of your listeners, perhaps.
Oh no, because they know where I'm. But I think that I'm so anti-crypto.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. So like, I think that Bitcoin was created by the government. I think it was created by whether it's NSA or the agencies as a way to to basically introduce digital currency, to get people excited about digital currency. I think it was also one of the ways of getting people to, again, if you look at what the process of the corruption by the elites has been, it is a process of getting us to exchange real things for fake things, getting us to exchange our hard-earned labor for a 401k tied to the stock market, right? That they have complete control over, getting us to trade real things for fiat currency, the numbers in a bank account that they can slowly, or actually quickly these days, degrade the value of through inflation and through overprinting. So I think that, to me, I think that crypto has been, if you look at, for instance, some of the statistics of how many households own gold or silver now versus, say, 50 years ago, it's kind of the same trend as how many houses had a garden before, right? How many families were in farming before. And so I think that a lot of the people, the younger people especially, that should be taking their hard-earned money and putting it into things like gold and silver and land, they've got caught up in putting it into crypto. And it's things like, well, yeah, of course, people say that, oh, everyone wants crypto, and so there's that desire, that creates the value of it, and look how high Bitcoin is. But what's to say Bitcoin won't be at $5,000 a coin in a year? What happens if there's some sort of grid down scenario for a couple of months and no one can even access their Bitcoin? What's going to happen then, right? So that's my perspective from that. But with the girls, or especially with June, my older one, I've taken her, I've shown her, okay, this is, see, these are my silver coins. I've got, I've always got a 10-ounce bar of silver sitting on my desk. And so I'll occasionally show it to her and say, look, this is real. This is silver. This is a real precious metal. Even, if she does really well, I might give her like a silver quarter, right? Here's like a 1960s quarter. Like, this is silver, so make sure you save it. So I'm starting to bring that bring it in. But yeah, that's a big thing. I think it's also a big aspect of the education is, Creature from Jekyll Island. Obviously, I'm not going to be reading her the book when she's 6 years old. She'll be the most boring book ever for her. But I think it's also important is because I think that we have to decouple ourselves from that way of thinking. I think as an adult, I'm still stuck in that level of thinking. As much as I know about these things, it's like, my framework was built on this. So that's one of the hopes, though, is just, kind of educating them on what is real money, what is real value. And even, educating, on, credit cards and dollar bills. Like, these are fake, they're fiat, right? It means that it's fake currency. And of course you can use it to buy things, but yeah, I think that's a central thing actually in terms of my overall plan in education, is just to help them understand the monetary system, but also understand how it's been absolutely weaponized against us and why it's not good to go into debt. And, the struggles that, I've had going into debt and getting out of debt and all these things. Like, those are crucial lessons.
Tucker Carlson just did an interview with, I think it's called Prince, the guy that wrote the book Princess or Prince of the Yen, or something like that. Anyway, it's stunning. I'm drawing a blank on his name, but stunning interview when he's actually proven that individual banks create money by credit extension. So it's not the idea that we think that the Federal Reserve generates the money or central banks, but individual banks do. It just creates this extension of a Ponzi scheme beyond anything we can comprehend. Real money and what you're saying here is really solid, because it gets us back into the tangible, and I'm with you. We don't think that way because we didn't grow up that way, right? We don't think in terms of having coin in our pocket, like real silver, real gold in our pocket. And yet my grandfather knew that. And my grandmother knew that. And my great-great-grandfather and great-great-grandmother knew that. So it is truly a reset in a different way. And I think what you're talking about is pretty fantastic. Just to highlight something you said, I looked it up as you were talking. And this is a pretty stunning statistic. Currently, approximately 55% of U.S. households now have a garden, and which translates to about 71.5 million households, or represents over 185 million people. That is a huge shift from the awareness of where we were. In fact, the United States now ranks third in countries in the world for gardening. How's that?
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
What a big shift. And I think the testimony to that is, as you've spoken about it, and I've spoken about it, and many others, I'm not isolating, but it's quite frankly a feel good moment where you're part of helping something grow in such a positive way. The Victory Gardens, obviously under Eleanor Roosevelt, which was originally test run or done in a small way in World War I, but then she picked up the program in World War II. The group that fought her was the agriculture department because they were afraid that people would outproduce commercial agriculture. At the end of World War II, the U.S. commercial agriculture had produced 10 million tons of food. At the end of World War II, U.S. households had produced equally 10 million tons of food. And with this comes the other problem, though, and I think this is where homesteading is a big shift, is food waste. And this is one that just drives me nuts. And here's a statistic for you. Americans currently waste 108 billion, with a B, pounds of food per year. And the trends are on the rise. And then that gets to that. So that's, according to a source, the United States discards nearly 60 million tons or 120 billion pounds of food every year, which is estimated to be almost 40% of the entire U.S. food supply. And it is. It's a society that has lost touch. And this is why this gets back to the moral and spiritual root of homesteading. Because when you grow it and tend to it and you see it, you don't cast it away. You don't waste it. It's a real, to me, this is an incredible statistic that gives us a glimpse of a society separated from the land and literally living in a decadent perspective that there's an unlimited supply and you can just do as you will with it. And it's such a tragedy when we start looking at this, because we know that statistic, like you said, in 3 years or 5 years, we look back on a show like this and we're like, look what we were talking about. In 3 years or 5 years, you look back on a show like this and look at those numbers again. And it might be the difference. Those numbers might have represented the people living or dying, where it's literally that critical. And we already have that problem. We have children that are suffering food scarcity in this country right now. We have massive amounts of homelessness. And again, I'm with you that whatever is going to happen the entire system has to be shaken, whether that's to tear it all down or whatever that is. But we have to get to a place again where we value one another and value some of the essentials, which is like this, like not wasting. The seventh pillar of County by County is conservation and stewardship. And it speaks right to things like this statistic where you're literally looking at the waste you have and just taking it for granted. Even the rules and regulations around food that is they throw out at a store, or food that they throw out at a restaurant, and how you can't reuse it. A buddy of mine when I was down in Georgia and I was living with him on a ranch or a farm, and then I was raising a pig down there while we were there. And he would go out and get bread from the day old and bring it in. And then it was lotted out. So it'd be like $40 for a massive truckload of day old bread. Of course, you bring it back. You're like, well, there's like 10 loaves that are nearly perfect, but say they're off by whatever that expiration date is, or some not even off by expiration. They didn't sell and they're clearing inventory. So again, it's just this a massive amount of waste that we get accustomed to, and we don't manage it well. And I think that, maybe speak to that a little bit on the homestead, how that mindset changes so much.
Well, it's crazy because as you're saying that, I'm thinking, I don't think that we don't waste a single morsel of food in our household. And the reason being, not because, we eat all of our food for every single meal, or we scrape our plates clean, especially with a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old. Half it ends up on the floor, half it's on my shirt somehow, half of it's not eaten. But when you have the systems that you can set up with even a small homestead, it doesn't require 7 acres of land. You can do it with a tiny little setup. It's like, okay, food scraps from cooking go to the compost, go to the chickens. The leftover watermelon, you get a big watermelon, cut it up and for a party, and half it's still there. Chickens love the watermelon. So that watermelon is turning into my eggs, which is great. We have a big compost. So everything that, actually the compost is in the chicken yard. So everything goes into the compost. The chickens, it's great. They scratch everything up. They'll pick at what they want to eat. And the rest of it gets turned into compost. We've got a worm bin. So, we have I think it's like a hungry bin or something like that Kate, my wife, manages. So a lot of the scraps go into worm bin, which then creates worm tea, which is an amazing fertilizer for our plants. The dogs get their fair share. So like that steak bone, that T-bone steak with the fat, and you can't like kind of carve it all off, whatever, or you just have leftovers, right? Because sometimes you're eating and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm way too full, and I'll feel sick if I eat the rest of that. Well, the dogs, they're gonna love it. We got two Labrador retrievers, like they love eating it. Makes them healthy because it's nice organic, non-mRNA meat that we're eating. And if they're not going to eat it, maybe the cats are going to eat it. So there's you create these systems where it's like, of course, we try to eat as much as we can. We try to waste food on a plate, but sometimes, especially again with kids, you will have that waste. But it's beautiful having your own systems. And even if we go out to eat, say we have leftovers, 9 times out of 10, we'll take it all to go. Like, actually put that all in a box for us. And like, really? It's just scraps, like pizza crust or whatever. Oh yeah, it's good for the chickens. So like everything, like that's the way to me. Like that's not waste, actually. Again, yeah, maybe it's waste from the perspective that it's food that someone else could have eaten. But the thing is that we're turning it into eggs, we're turning it into fertilizer, we're turning it into compost that then helps us produce healthier food and healthier, plants that come back the next year. And so that's how we look at it. And that's just the amazing thing about having just a little small homestead. Even if you have a couple of chickens, a small garden, a little compost bin, it's all it takes, even for a small sized family, to no longer have
I
any
100%
waste.
agree. We just pulled out 6 dump truck loads of cattle muck out of the lower pasture. Now I don't have that level of composting setup that's coming, right? But
That's a lot to deal
man,
with.
You're not kidding. But fortunately, my neighbor had the dump truck, and he does have the capacity. So it was an easy trade. And he brought the dump truck over, loaded it up, and then he got the compost waste. And that's again too just a reflection of an alternate economy, because it's all of that is working together for who benefits, and nothing again is wasted. I think everything that you mentioned, which is important, it's not waste. It's a process of a living ecosystem that we're talking about in homesteading. And increasingly kind of come to that place of how do we better use everything? I'm with you. We don't waste anything. The dogs will always get, at the end of the day, what no one else wants. They usually want it. The chickens are actually great weeders and great in use of anything of extra fruit or vegetables you have. They're just going to consume it. And the cattle just are normal, their process. They're gonna graze, and their cycle. That's another thing that's interesting, is the misconception about cattle, and why I like to say I'm primarily carnivore, but being carnivore is actually truly being vegetarian, because cattle eat grass. Grass gets converted to something our bodies can use, which is beef, and then we eat the beef. So we're not able to process a lot of these as a true vegetarian. Our like a cow has 3 stomachs, and when you look at grass, how much it takes to process that grass and break it down, it takes 3 stomachs to do it, right? So there's a real interesting thing when we start to get back into the balance of all things, of how everything does feed in. Nothing is wasted. If I had pigs, there's even less waste. And it's one of the things that, and as we're moving towards probably this next year, it depends on how quickly I get it done, but eventually there's going to be a butchery on the farm, on the ranch. And one of those things to look at, obviously, when you have the guts and so forth from the cows, is what you have to deal with that waste. And you can compost some of it, but it's also within like feeding it over time. It's great food for pigs. So even though I'm not a pig farmer, it opens that opportunity up down the way to look at that as a possible use of a natural recycling, which just again helps things overall. So there is a balance in everything we do, and I think that's the realization when you're the separation and realization. When you're on homestead, the realization how everything has part of the ecosystem, and when you're living into the city world where there's no connection, there's really no other thing. You either eat it or you throw it away, and if you don't like it, there's nothing else to do with it, so it ends up in the garbage, which is a real tragedy. That's one of probably the biggest testimonies of the failure of the modern state, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. And I live that in New York City. I mean, I rarely cooked at home, ate almost every meal out, or got to go or delivery. And it all shows up, and it's in all this styrofoam and plastic and aluminum packaging, which ends up you just go shove it down the trash chute in your apartment building. And it's just, I mean, as much as, the controllers, what, the elite, I don't like using the word elites because it's like it gives it too much credit to them. But as much as they talk about the green agenda and everything, putting people into cities is one of the worst things you could possibly do. Those things are going to generate so much waste because you have no systems for this. But you live out in the country, it's exactly it. It's like what we're talking about. Now, of course, we waste. There's packaging that things come in and those get wasted, and you have to throw them away or burn the cardboard or whatever it is. But the idea that when you're living integrated with the land, especially if you start getting into permaculture and setting up sustainable and renewable systems like that, it's incredible how much bounty that God gives you. And I remember actually it was kind of disappointing. I remember when Trump was first getting in and they had Joel Salatin was being kind of tapped for some stuff. I was saying, gosh, imagine if America can kind of start stepping away from this giant, Bayer Monsanto monocrop agriculture and start introducing permaculture. And you look at permaculture farms and on an acre of land, they'll produce more than what 15 acres will produce of monocrop
Absolutely.
agriculture. There's so much bounty there. And so I think that, again, it's just one of those lessons like, okay, Seth, don't rely on the government to do it. They're not going to do it, right? They're still owned by big pharma. They're still owned by big ag, by big food, but do it in the small community. And that's
so
key.
As we kind of bring things to a close, let's really dig however much you want to talk about it. But I think a great way to kind of pull this all together is your book that's coming. And that's Prep Like, it was a Prep Like, what is it?
Prep Like Noah.
Yeah, so go ahead and talk a little bit about it. I think it's exciting. I've seen the cover of it. It's a great cover, by the way. Nice design. Did you do that?
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
nice
did,
artwork.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of good. So
thank you.
Yeah, talk about that.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting because the initial idea was to create like a 20-page ebook and just kind of give it out for people, kind of a basic guide to prepping. But it got much deeper, and it started to get it more tied into a lot of what we're talking about, this spiritual feeling. And the thing is that, if you said, Seth, what is your favorite kind of book to read or listen to? It's books about preparedness, right? It's, typically I'm listening to audiobooks of, novels, nonfiction novels. Or is it? No, sorry, fiction novels about EMP scenarios, or I'm fascinated by these books. I find it very entertaining to kind of walk through what this family does for like the first 5 years after an EMP goes off, right? Because they're written by experts, and you learn so much. But whether it's those or whether it's the other books that are the Prepping 101 books, rarely is there any aspect of spiritual or higher calling that's worked into that. They're very much so survivalist. And so the idea with Prep Like Noah is I do feel like that we were in the days of Noah. You look back at what was happening, the genetic modification, the blending of species, the evil that was rampant. I mean, I think that we are living in the days of Noah. I think a lot of people that, especially your listeners, would probably agree with that. And so the premise of it is, it's fundamentally, it's really kind of written to be a prepping 101 guide, right? So it's written to be something that, someone who is a hardcore prepper, they'll still learn from it, but they've got they've got Foxfire, you know what I mean? They've got hardcore encyclopedias and stuff. So it's really written to be something to make it feel accessible, right? So maybe someone who's really dedicated in preparedness, they might read it like, this is great, but this is a great gift, right? So like, my mom, who I've been trying to encourage her to do more. It's a book that's kind of rewritten to kind of hold people's hands and walk them through history, looking at like how easy it is, how fragile our supply chain is. It's helping to kind of educate people on why it's even important to live like this, and how actually our grandparents didn't call it prepping, they called it living, right? That's one of the themes to it. But it's framed from the perspective of Noah. And it's like, look at this guy, Noah, who spent, I think it was like 100 years building an ark, mocked by his community, but because he had faith and he felt like there's this bigger plan for him that he was following. But also the idea is that, like, Noah didn't build an ark for his family to survive. Noah built an ark so that his family could help rebuild civilization on the other side of the flood. And that's where I feel like that we are. It's not about surviving. It's about this understanding that there's a greater purpose to why we're doing this. And I don't know what it is yet. I have a feeling, but it's like I don't know what it looks like. But it's like I can have the mental picture of what it's starting to emerge. And so that's a big part of the book is it's merging that higher perspective into the overall narrative of preparedness, that it's actually not about survival. It's about a moral responsibility as a head of a household or as the pillar of your community. And so that's really what it is. It's walking through walking through the spiritual battle, the battle of good and evil, what's happening on this planet right now, the threat of AI, the threat of these fragile systems, the threat of being put into a situation where you only get your food if you have your digital passport that shows you're up to date on your vaccinations. It's walking through the very real scenario that we're facing as humanity, but then taking people back into the purpose and walking through the own journey that we went through, that preparedness should not be done out of fear. It should be done out of a responsibility. And I think fundamentally out of a deep soul level desire to return back to tradition. And so that's the framework the whole book is written on. So instead of it being an ebook, it's actually going to be probably a 300-page printed book. So I'm designing the book as well. My background is design. So I'm laying it out, putting graphics, and it's going to be a really easy book to read. It's not going to be a dense text. But also, so part of it, and this is what's emerged in the past couple of months, is that we realized that the book is one part, but actually, again, the lesson I was talking about earlier, going from the survival preparedness to the community aspect of it. So simultaneously, we're building the Prep Like Noah community. And so I think that's actually the bigger thing. Like the book is part of it. I think the community is the bigger thing. And so the idea with that is that we want to build a digital place for people to meet where they can then form offline relationships, right? Because that's, as much as I hate technology, it's like, well, you can still use technology to listen to your Bards FM podcast, right? Or
right.
to, find your friend on Facebook or in your Telegram group that knows how to, take care of a chicken that has the egg that has issues coming out, right? So as part of the book is we're building the community, and the idea of the community is that we want to have an online place that people have access to a huge library. So I want to slowly build out like a massive library of content, how-to tutorials for water purification, how to preserve food, how to freeze dry meat, how to install solar, right? So we want to build up a massive library, but also then have probably weekly live Q&As. So bring in experts every week that will come in and do live Q&As. Like Billy Bond. I'm not sure if you know Billy Bond. He's got Permapastures Farm. Amazing guy, but he's an expert in permaculture and pigs and everything. So maybe bring him on. So this week we're going to do a live Q&A with Billy Bond, right, on permaculture. But also I think one of the keys though is we want to build it in a way that everyone's profile shows what they're an expert at. And then you can also then go in and you can find your region and you can find your chapter. So say you go in and you find, so say you're in Ohio, right? You say, oh, okay, I'm going to join the Ohio chapter. But then there's like the Ohio is divided into say 5 sections. So then the Ohio Northwest chapter of the Prep Like Noah community. But then we want to encourage people to then have chapter heads that are actually holding local community events. So maybe we'll do like an annual meetup, like an annual kind of like everyone Prep Like Noah community meetup. That everyone can kind of come in, and maybe it's like a 3-day weekend type thing where we have guest speakers coming in and everything. But one of the keys though is just allowing people to kind of meet those people in their local area that align with them. But also we want to have it so that on every person's profile, you can see what their expertise is. Right. And so if someone like a friend that is an expert in solar, like I want him to join it. And so that way people say, hey, this guy's a solar expert. And so that way there's a forum aspect to it. So if someone's having an issue with solar, they can find this person that can answer their questions. And maybe they say, look, offline, maybe, hey, how about I'll give you, 200 rounds of 5.56 for you to come spend a day and help me with my solar setup, right? We want to encourage that as part of it. And that's I feel like that's becoming actually the bigger project is building this online community.
So what's the projection for your release? Do you have one?
So the first step is, so initially we're thinking, okay, let's build the whole thing and then invite people into it. But then what we realize is like, no, let's actually get the community to help build the community, right? So what we've done is actually just on our show last week, at the very end of it, I put a little message out there and saying, hey, like we're looking for what we're calling our community pillars, right? So the people that want to come in at the very beginning and so join, like I would say, it's a weekly call where we're asking, because that's also what I realized with community is I don't know everything. I know so little, but we want to invite people in that will actually help us think through, help us build this. So what we're doing right now is that I think we opened up 75 spots. It might expand to say, a couple hundred of people that want to become the community pillars, people that are passionate about it and that they want to come in and help establish the community, come in and help, have a meeting with me and some of the other community pillars where we're saying, okay, hey, what are some of the core functions we need? Because maybe someone says, hey, it'd be really helpful is if you could include this feature. It's like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Like maybe, we want to have a map where you click on your region, you can see where everyone's at potentially, right? Or maybe there's a, whatever it is. So that's, we're already opening up. I made the announcement. I think we probably had, 30 emails come in so far. We still have an email address at just community@preplikenoah.com. So if anyone wants to kind of come in as one of the pillars and they want to help us kind of launch it, we're saying, look, just shoot us an email, introduce yourself and let us know what your specialties are. So we can start to kind of build out that initial core. We call them the pillars. So even with your listeners, if any of them want to come and join it, and it's, so how we're doing it is, well, I'll tell you, I'll finish that. They can just email community@preplikenoah.com. That's it. So community@preplikenoah. Now, long-term, we're thinking about, okay, how do we structure it? Do we do it as like a big free community, or is it something that has a paywall? And what I decided what I do is make it so that it's pay what you want. So if someone wants to join and say they're really tight, if they want to pay $1 a month to be part of it, they can, right? So it's kind of like it's not going to be something where it's like, oh, it's another $20 a month charge. But the reason being is that we want people that are serious about it, which, it's a buck a month at a minimum, right? But also what that does is it prevents all the AI bots coming in. It prevents all the other things coming in, because when you open up just a free thing, unfortunately, you'll get so many bots and so many AI coming in. But also that way we can start to develop it. So we have some income to kind of build it, to host events and everything. So, but what we're doing is that anybody who comes in at the pillar level, it's just free lifetime membership for them. They get access to it because they're helping us build it. And we really appreciate that. But then once we launch it, which it might be, so like I said, the community, the pillars, we're already doing things. We're already starting, we're sending emails out, getting them signed up to kind of start the initial process of brainstorming and coming together. But then the actual community itself, in terms of launching it properly publicly, it might be 3 to 6 months or so, depends on how quickly we can get things done. But that's the idea, though, is it's going to be a place that, people are very serious, they're very dedicated, but like fundamentally, though, there's a mission of allowing people to gain access to other people. That's something that I hear a lot too, whenever I do like, Bard's Fest or go to different events or I talk to people. Oftentimes I'll hear them say, I feel so alone. Right.
Yeah.
And I know that you've done a great job building your Bard's Nation. You've done a great job building your community. I think that your listeners are very lucky to have that. I think for a lot of people, though, they don't know how to find people. They're in an ocean of this. It's only them. Their family doesn't prepare. They can't find people, locally. So I think the idea is part of it is to really help build out these chapters and build out this big movement of people that are all really, for the most part, ideologically aligned with stewardship and a lot of things that you talk so much about. So that's the plan with the community.
I think it's totally awesome. Something we're working on, and just you might add to what you're doing. I mean, and you're welcome. I would like to get you involved in kind of one of the next steps we're doing.
I'd love to. Whatever it is, I'd love to.
That's all. Okay, here we go. We're actually. It'll probably launch. This is part of the website remake right now, and we're getting ready. That I don't know if it's going to be December or if it's going to be January, but we're going to be putting out a quarterly printed journal, and I'm in reverse of the normal release. So it's going to require an address, so that you actually get it. It'll be printed and mailed to you, and the delay will be the digital component. So usually you get the digital first. I'm going to reverse it.
Oh yeah.
And what I'm really trying to gear up here, and why I'm encouraging you to, want to, I mean, in fact, I want to do more than that because I want to have you write, or I want to we'll talk about what that looks like, but we're going to have feature writers, and I would like to have you contribute and do like a feature piece on Prep Like Noah, and we can do a whole issue. But my point of this is that by getting addresses, and it's been well received by the community, and we're getting ready to put all that together. We are creating an ability to step outside of the dedication on the web. We're going to probably some sort of central, as we know, central digital ID and the Zero Trust Network stuff. And that's really my red line, because I'm just like, I can't go down that way. And so what I'm trying to prep the ground for ourselves, and we've talked about this for about a year, but it's finally coming together, is how do we stay connected in a place when I don't want to connect through digital anymore? And we kind of go back to Pony Express, so to speak, metaphorically speaking. And with that, there's one of those things that I'm committed to is if we start doing that, if we get to that place, I can record podcasts and put them on a USB stick and send them, so we can have a connection by story and a connection by written. And of course, the writing piece is important because we're back to touching as part of that, full ecosystem of learning. We're touching, we're turning pages. So anyway, that's the project we're heading on, and really trying to support the Pillars of County by County and other events. And I think it would be a great, as we go forward, and I'll talk to you more about this offline. I think it's a great opportunity to bring some of what you're doing and take advantage of this and get to where you have an expanded reach and a connectivity source that's not just dependent on the web. That's my thoughts.
I love the idea of that. I mean, I worked in newsprint for probably 10 or 12 years. I mean, I've redesigned magazines. I did newspaper redesigns. I was visiting the printing press every week, smelling the fresh ink. I'm a big believer in print. And this was that time, this is back in 2008. I started working at the Epoch Times, and this was that time that everyone was going digital. Like, no one wanted to touch a physical newspaper, right? Yeah. But actually now I subscribe, and I love. I don't make enough time for it, but I love sometimes being able to sit down and just unfold the big newspaper and read the articles, right? And with no screen involved. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I was thinking of some ideas like that with the Prep Like Noah community as well. And maybe there's some ways that we can combine our efforts on that.
Absolutely.
Right?
No, I think we need to, that's part of, again, that's community. We're bringing communities together. So 100% agree. And we'll talk more about that as we get a little closer. Our website redo is happening now concurrently, and it will be over the next, just depends on how long, probably 45 days or so. And then we're kind of doing the relaunch. And with that, it's a big part of this is prepping for that next piece, which is the print. And I think that as you're doing, it's interesting because I've got about 3 books penned out. And I'm smiling as you're telling the story of building your community. And that's essentially like, what's the pre-step to the book, right? And that is from us here. We built out in our website, we already have, which again, I'm happy to share that information to help you, but we've already built a community social media site on our website. And that was quite an effort. And as we go down the road, happy to share what knowledge I can with you to avoid ridiculous costs. This is, I'm telling you, I don't want to get into that, but anyway. But we ended up with just a really cool community site that's kind of a hybrid between Facebook and Telegram. And we're going to reintroduce that, obviously. And what it allows for is building intentional communities. And that's kind of the whole piece. I think what you're talking about is intentional communities. It's not just, I'm really wanting that my focus in everything we're doing and kind of reshaping is getting away from just anything, post anything, comment anything idea, and just creating environments where we're intentionally having discussions. And with intentional discussions, we have beautiful change. And I sound like Trump, beautiful, beautiful. Not trying to do that, but I'm saying we have real change that happens because we're in discussions. We're not just, slamming whatever we want on the web, saying whatever we want. There's a design of why you're there. So there's within each group, there's boundaries, which have to be. One of the coolest, there's a group I just follow. It's a group on just raising chickens on Telegram. And it's just constantly, all they talk about is every possible thing under the sun of chickens. but
is it Make Chickens Great Again?
Yes, yes, yeah, that's it. Yeah,
yeah, I'm in that.
Okay, so there it is. I mean, that's an intentional community, a great example of an intentional community. In fact, one day I accidentally, since I was moving quick and moving something to my saves in Telegram, and I accidentally threw something in there. They're like, "Why did you put this in there?" I'm like, "Sorry," and I'm glad they called me out on it, because I didn't even know I'd done it. But that's the point: is keeping things focused on these communities is a something I feel very strongly about, as we build these things, to be intentional about what we're trying to do, and not just like everybody else. Like, oh, I'm just going to open up the comment section so you can smear and post whatever you want out here. That's absolutely, we've got to get past that. We've got to start moving towards a purpose and an intent of what we're trying to achieve, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more. And that's the idea with starting with these, what we call the community pillars, right? The people that want to come in that have a long-term vested interest in helping moderate, helping to become part of the community. And it's why it's not something that, it's not me building some community for everybody else. It's actually everyone else building a community together. And that's why we're going about it this way, and why we're starting. It's amazing, actually. Again, I just mentioned it just briefly on end of you and I's interview, which is already almost an hour and 40-minute interview for the people that made it to the very end. It's congratulations. But it's like, I've gotten the most amazing emails so far. People emailing me, it's like, Seth, I love the idea of this. I'm a retired ER doctor that I've been living off grid for the past 20 years, and we've done this, right? People emailing and saying, oh, it's just, you have these amazing people that they're like, how I'd love to be able to contribute. And like, that's the idea of it. And I like, because I played on the ideas like, okay, should it be something that is just free and open to everybody, or should I limit and say? That's why I came up with the idea of like, well, just make it pay what you want. It's like, if you can only afford $1 a month, that's fine, right? But I think that already starts to limit.
It does,
because what you don't want to have happen is a bunch of anonymous accounts that are coming in there and just stirring. Like, you look at my Rumble comments, or your Rumble comments or whatever, and it's like, people say the most rotten things on there. So that's the idea, is that we want to make it so that there's some level of requirement to come in, that you're serious, you're a real human being, and there's gonna be very strict rules, like civility. Like, I'm working right now on the mission and vision for the book and the community and everything, but civility is gonna be really important. We're civil with each other. If people are trolls, whatever, they're gonna get kicked out. Doesn't matter who they are, because we want to build that kind of place. But ultimately, it's funny how it's like the chicken or the egg, right? Because I think the idea is, I think, who knows, maybe in 3 years we have no internet anymore. Like, right. I have no idea, right? But the idea is that what the most important function of it is building these offline connections. And that's why the chapters are going to be really, really important.
Agreed.
Finding people that are chapter heads, they're organizing their areas, and they're bringing people together. That's going to be such a critical point of the entire thing. And also making it so that people have access to all the information, all the tutorials, and maybe we'll find some way of giving them offline access. Hey, you can download this if you want to download the library. Here's a way you can do it. But yeah, it's just funny how in sync that we are in this journey.
No, it is really amazing. And like you said, Epic Times does a good job at a lot of that. They really do. My parents love the Epic Times newspaper. It is like, that is they don't even they take a local just to keep up with it, like a Sunday, but their paper and it is up for renewal. My mom was like, "Are you paying for this?" And I said, "Well, yeah." Like, "No, you're not. We're paying for it." I'm like, "Okay, we'll get in that discussion later." But anyway, they love the paper, and it's really amazing to see. And one of the reasons they love it so much is the articles about applied things, whether it's recipes or gardening or health. It does
tradition.
It does. Yeah. It does a great job at it. So anyway, fantastic discussion today. Seth, give us a couple addresses where people can follow you. You mentioned your Prep Like Noah. I know you have Man in America. Where can people link up with you? Yeah. Well, so first off, anyone that is interested in becoming a pillar of the community, just email community@preplikeNoah.com. That's it. The preplikeNoah.com website we haven't set up yet. So if someone visits that, it might just be a redirect to like a promo or something like that. So that's not built yet. But in terms of people following the podcast, Man in America podcast, which is where our recent interview is on, basically any place that they except YouTube. I still have a YouTube channel, but only 10% goes on there. Actually, I put our interview on YouTube, and it never got canceled. So it's still up on there. So your voice, it's amazing, actually, because I know your voice probably has flags all over it. Oh, it's a rash. Extremist. But really, so Rumble's the main place. I wish, as we were talking about before, I wish I would have gone the audio only. I
I love audio only for a lot of reasons, but I do video because I think it allows you to reach a different crowd, that people that want to watch, they want to see who it is and whatnot. So Rumble, if they want to watch video, but for podcast, Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcast, any place like that, they just go search for Man in America,
That's
and
awesome.
they'll find the podcast on there. All the Man in America content's free. There's no, similar to you. It's like, okay, there's the occasional ad in there for something that's I like to use, but other than that, there's no paywall for Men in America.
Yeah, that's it. That's good. Well, we always close with a prayer. If it's okay, I'll do a prayer. That's good.
Please do. I was looking forward to it.
And Father God, I just want to thank you for this time and just a great conversation with Seth. And just again, it's just a reminder how you just work with us, and we end up walking very similar paths. And it's just bringing hearts in alignment and just visions in alignment. It's just a very refreshing and blessed conversation today. We just want to pray over his vision of prep like Noah, which is, again, building intentional communities and really taking that spirit of getting back to the land and building community at its core, and just pray a blessing over all that for all the success that he has. And may that continue to build bridges, both internal and external, and to lift each other up, to really realize that we're at such a critical time right now that we need each other in such a critical way, that we need to find the ways and pathways through to find peace and love in our heart. In Christ Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Awesome conversation, man. Always enjoy it. You are welcome here anytime. And I would like to, we mentioned this on the other show, but I really like to stay in touch. And, especially as you're going forward, maybe once a month or something, have you on, if you're okay with that.
I'd love to. Yeah. Let's, we'll get those connections set up offline. And yeah, we could just do, you're on my show once a month, I'm on your show once a month,
Perfect.
just as a regular check-in. I'd love it. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Well, that's great. Well, have a blessed day, Seth. Thank you for your time. And it's just awesome. We'll talk soon.
Thank you too, Scott.
All right. God bless. Well, Patriots, that was Seth Holthouse, Man in America. Great guy. Interesting how over the years we've come to know each other, and just a lot of respect for him and all that he's built. Do check out his programs. They're outstanding. He does great interviews, and he has great guests, and just some really good programming all the way around. So with that, keep your head up and your eyes forward. Never bow to evil. Never relent. Always press into the fight. God is with us. He'll never forsake us. And in the end, God always wins. But we are here in this time, in this place, for just such a time as this. We are at war. So walk boldly and fearlessly with Christ. Occupy the land. Expand the kingdom. Subdue the enemy. Mission forward. Patriots, I'll see you tomorrow morning for Bards AM. Until then, or until the next time, God bless. Good night. Thank you. And out for now.